Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show. Discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are. Hosted by Desiree Duffy.
Hi, welcome. My name is Desiree Duffy, and I'm your host. This is the Books That Make You show. And today, we're talking about books that make you cranky, or maybe embrace your crankiness. I get it. The world has gone pretty nuts, right? And we've been stuck inside for longer than we can count. We're not sure when we're going to be able to go outside again. And even if we can go outside, well, it's cold outside and we're about ready to just throttle the people that live with us and that we apparently love the most. I'm not sure if I do anymore, but here to help us embrace our crankiness is the crankiness expert. Stephen Joseph is here with us, and he's been with us before. You might remember that he wrote the book about crankiness, The Last Surviving Dinosaur, for kids, and we talked to him about that. And when we had him on the show, we were talking about his forthcoming book, which is the Crankosaurus Method, a grown-up guide to effective crankiness. Yeah. There it is. I am happy that Stephen Joseph is here with us again today. He is also a humorist. He is an attorney. He has spent 28 years as a partner with different therapists. And he has spent a lifetime of shuckling at countless synagogues. We'll find out more about that. As well as many years sitting on a cushion staring at the white wall at the village Zendo. He is somebody who has written not only one, but two amazing books. And he is here with us today to help us explore our inner Crankosaurus and maybe help us deal with some of the craziness that's going on in the world. Hi, Stephen. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm excited because I'm about ready to, so tell me, crankiness, embracing crankiness. That means we can throw things at people, across the room. We can jump on them and just throttle them. Is that what this is about?
Oh, no. It's about effective crankiness. Now, some people might think throwing things across the room is very effective, but it might not be. So, it's not effective for me. I mean, I've tried that. Actually, I tried that, and it didn't work out too well. So. That's partly why I have a book, it's just on effective crankiness.
Okay, effective crankiness. I think maybe that was the word I was missing. Mm. Can you tell us, okay, so why is it better for people to embrace their crankiness? Because it feels like there's a lot of self-help books that are out there that want you to be mindful and meditate and do all of these breathing exercises and things. You take that and flip it a little bit. Don't you? You're more about, hey, it's okay to be cranky. Can you tell us a little bit more about your philosophy?
Well, the big thing, there's a couple things. First of all, I give it a name, a fun name, where it almost has a physical aspect to it. So I call it a Crankatsuris. Saurus being this Yiddish word for problems, like I have my Saurus, you have your Saurus, but no one could outdo my Saurus. I have such Saurus. And cranky, then that's how the TyrantoCrankaTsuris came to being, and that's the smallest but most dangerous dinosaur that millions of years later we actually evolved from. We came from this cranky dinosaur. So giving it a name. And the other thing to realize, we talk about the common cold. And in the common cold, you might have 2 or 3 a year, or maybe 1, or you might not have any in a whole year, but we still call it the common cold. But if it's a common Crankatsuris, that you got 2 or 3 Crankatsuruses in a day, maybe more, you might as well embrace it and figure out how to use it more effectively, not just going off and just being all over the place. It's a little bit more of a mindfulness. When you think of cranky, you think of something in your head, and sometimes it goes straight to your mouth. And I'm saying, well, maybe it's good to stick it in the Crankatsuris here and not go just let it out of your mouth when you could be hurtful to many people.
Right. And that's why I love the Crankosaurus, because yes, it's a Yiddish word. And then it also evokes, obviously, the dinosaur. I drew this dinosaur in homage to you and the Crankosaurus Method, and the cute one that we have on the children's book too. So tell us a little bit, because you have a great story of how the first book and how this whole idea came into being. You were with your girlfriend, and I think you were in Italy at the time. Do you want to tell us about
Yes.
that?
Oh, yeah. No, that's how it is all accidental. And my background is more as a negotiator. I actually teach negotiation as an attorney. So that's how my mind always goes anyway. But what happened was we were in Rome, and we were at this Airbnb apartment. We just landed, so you can imagine we have jet lag, we're tired, and the electricity, it's summertime, it's middle of August, 95 degrees outside. The electricity goes out, so now it's hot inside. And she was coloring her hair and put this black dye going in her eyes. So she was cranky, and she continued to be cranky. So finally, it just came out of my mouth that she was like a TyrantoCrankaTsuris, and I just created that word. And I even said that that's probably how all the dinosaurs vanished. There's one little teeny weeny dinosaur, the TyrantoCrankatsuris, and she started cranking out her saurus till all the bigger dinosaurs couldn't take it anymore, and they all fled. So that months later became the story of the book. But what happened in our relationship, we created this word, Crankatsuris. It was used. Whenever we were feeling a little cranky and something is a little bit off, that I want to bite her head off, like the dinosaur. So I could say, wait a sec, I'm feeling a Crankatsuris in me. And just so you know, I could give you a warning. I could go to another room. I could talk about it. I could do something about it. I don't have to necessarily just go from here to here and create this whole thing, or throw that book down against the wall or whatever. So it's about you being cranky, saying, yeah, I am. It happens. And then it becomes effective crankiness, or the Crankatsuris Method, like I call it.
Yeah. And I love that you kind of gave it a name like that, and you gave it something that people can kind of cling on to. And the story of how your girlfriend helped inspire you, because we've all had those moments, right? We've all been there. We can identify exactly with what you're talking about. But if we don't recognize it, embrace it, like you say, and understand it, that's when it can really get out of control. And you take it with such a sense of humor. You are a humorist. And I do want to talk about your blog in a little bit too, because you do such a great job of telling these stories. So tell us a little bit about how this all came together, because I feel too your heritage has a lot to play into it. Shuckling at countless synagogues, for example. I'm pulling that right out of your bio. How did you, Stephen, and your Jewish heritage and everything that goes on in your humorous mind, how did that all come together to bring this to the forefront?
Well, there's different pieces. So you mentioned shuckling at the synagogue, or going to the village zendo to stare at a white wall, and then also I was married to somebody who we're not together, but I love her very much, and brought her dinner yesterday. So she would give me like every sort of self-help book, and then we got into like this Zen practice, and all these books, the self-help books had this one idea, but then every chapter talks about the same thing. Then and my book does not do that. It likes to tell stories and different sort of things. So you could pick up a different piece in each chapter, and there's like 41 chapters. But the Zen piece is actually probably even more important than the Jewish piece. I do get into my Jewish stories, related stories. I do draw on that. But I always was reminded by reading these books on enlightenment. And there was the path to enlightenment. And you go to the Zendo, we all want to reach this enlightened space. And I got really happy by noticing that, hey, I really don't want to be enlightened at all, so I'm just dropping it. And once I stopped trying to get what I was supposed to get, then I feel like, oh, I'm here. I'm just a white wall. So it's the same thing with crankiness. If you're trying to, I have to get rid of it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you get more and more lost. So it's about like, oh, I'm going to embrace the thing that I'm trying to get rid of, and it becomes your friend. Once it becomes your friend, you could slow it down, and you're more able to use it, again, in an effective way.
I love that. I mean, it's really just a matter of just, like you said, embracing it and accepting. And you're right. So many books and people, Sherpas and gurus, they want you to find this enlightenment. They want you to find this higher thing. And sometimes just sitting back and saying, hey, I'm good with what I've got. That's part of, just finding that thing that you thought you needed in and of itself. So I really like that. And I like too, you mentioned some of the stories that you tell in the book as well as on your blog. So I'll give you an open forum. Do you have a story, a parable, or something that you'd like to share with us? Something that is either in your book or on your blog?
Okay, so I just recently, there's a lot of stories, and I actually start falling in love with the newest ones, and this is on my blog, which is actually like a New Year's story, and it's called Crankosaurus Exodus, and it retells the story of the Jewish people leaving the land of Egypt where they were slaves, and they go to the land of Israel. So how it starts, well, first of all, I tell the story where I say like a saying that I just don't understand. Again, like turning something upside down, where like they always have a saying, you hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst. Mm-hmm. And I start telling the story, it's like, never really understood that, where you hope for the best, but I never understood that. And I tell the story of little Timmy, who fails on all his exams. And when his parents asked him why he did so poorly, he said, well, I hope for the best, but I only prepared for the worst. So getting to the story of the Jewish people leaving Egypt, they got this brochure that said, be forewarned, while we hope for the best, we only prepared for the worst. So it goes. So of course, for example, they get to the Red Sea, and everyone's waiting. Where's the cruise ship? Why would you take us directly to the Red Sea unless you have this big cruise ship? And Moses says, well, I hope for the best, but I only prepared for the worst. And then they get to the mountain, and in the story, while Moses is up in the mountain, they get this golden calf. And of course, they get the golden calf from Wuhan, China, and they all got COVID 1000 BC. So again, when Moses came down, they all want to know, do you have the vaccine? And he said, I hope no vaccine, because I hope for the best, but I only prepared for the worst. And one of the things that, like, they were going around in circles in the desert for 40 years, and the only foods they had was borscht, potato pancakes, and cheese balances, and they finally realized they were walking in circles, but if they do the dripping of the borscht on a line, they could figure out that where they haven't been again. And that line became the Borscht Belt. And it led them straight to the land of Israel. And the thing about it, their plan, because one of the warnings on the brochure was that there was a hostile population. And the plan was to let out this Crankatsuris, and the hostile population couldn't take the Crankosaurus, and they will all run away. It turned out the only reason they were hostile was because they had their own Crankosaurus. But when they heard that the Jewish people had their Crankosaurus, they were so happy because this was new Crankosaurus, and they all got together and had a big party. And they realized that one of the reasons they had the Crankosaurus is because they only prepared for the worst. And if they prepared for the best, they would have less Crankosaurus. So, of course, that was the message for 2021. So it should be a year that not only we hope for the best, but we should actually prepare for the best. I know it's crazy, but it's just a little advice I give.
I think that's great advice. And maybe it's because we've been beaten down for the entire 2020. And then as we started 2021, there was so much optimistic. It just feels like we kind of got slapped down again. There's so much craziness going on in the world. It's almost like people are afraid to be hopeful. They're afraid to prepare for the best, but you're just like, do it. And I love that. So props to you for approaching it that way. And I will say that people should really check out your blog on your website. Go ahead and give it. We'll give it at the end too, but give it right now so that people, if they want to go to it right now.
It's StephenJosephAuthor.com. And there's every story should make you laugh. That's part of it, and then you actually could learn something from it as well. Those are the two things that when I write a blog, I want to put out there that hopefully it even cracks you up and you learn something.
It does. I can speak for myself. I'm always laughing out loud and snorting my coffee out of my nose when I'm reading your blogs because they're so great. And that creative energy. Okay, so I love that creative energy. So we can tell the storytelling and just that juxtaposition of seemingly very different things. You have this wonderful way of pulling them together. So I got to ask, knowing that you're a negotiator too, you're an attorney, is that, do you think, where some of that comes from? Are you pulling in your negotiating skills as an attorney and just kind of pulling in these different sides to bring them together to give us this unique perspective and these stories? Is that where it comes from?
Well, when I teach about negotiation, there's different things I talk about. It's actually in the book that I talk about in terms of Crankatsuris. So there's one chapter, Crankasaurus Madness, where the example is somebody is mad at you, and your negotiation goal, your assignment is to make that other person not mad at you, and I want them to use legal defenses. This was with defense counsel. That they would normally use, like in a case. And so if you can imagine, like, for example, just a basic counterclaim. You're mad at me, I'm the one who should be mad at you. That would be a counterclaim. And I talk about, when I talk with attorneys, I talk about arguing takes away your power. And I talk about that in another chapter. And lawyers always like to argue. What do you mean I can't argue? And the reason argue is when you have X. Like when I have this, I'm not arguing. This is what I have, and I talk about water. Like I'm even saying in the book, you can't fight. You can't put out a Crankosaurus fire with another Crankosaurus fire, because I did go to the firehouse and I asked the firemen. I said, like, what kind of high impact explosives do you use? To use gasoline, it has to be premium gasoline, and they actually told me they use water, and who knew? But the point is, water always provides clarity, and it's a calming piece. When you think about water, you feel it's a way of feeling more calm. as opposed when you think about fire, you're going to start the fire. It's probably not very good. So I do pull out a lot of different things from my experience as a lawyer, as experience as a negotiator, where it's always also important to listen to the other side and show empathy. One of the pieces in my book is about like having empathy and also having a sense of mindfulness. I think those are two very important things in negotiation, and it's important when you deal with crankiness.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, we're laughing, and it's just because you have such a unique perspective on it. Obviously, water, huh? Who would have thought? But it's so true, and I do feel like, especially right now, with so many people being polarized, there's mothers and sons that aren't talking right now. There's husband and wives that don't communicate. We all, hear that, cliche about the aunt or the uncle who's on the other side, and you feel like you can't communicate with them anymore. And so it seems that this book right now, more than ever, it just came out, and maybe it's needed now at this point in time more than at any other time. Do you think?
Well, I think it slows people's thought process down and make people think a little bit more. A couple pieces from the book. One chapter is called Crankosaurus Kryptonite, and it talks about how we all have our kryptonite. And I always find it funny that Superman, one episode, some bad guys put out some kryptonite. He's almost kaput. And the next episode, you don't see him going to a doctor, and trying to figure out, how do I deal with my kryptonite? And then the other thing that never happens, Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane don't say, you know what, I'm tired with this guy with the kryptonite. Let's find another superhero. I mean, in our own lives, we all have our kryptonite. Like, you have your kryptonite, I have my kryptonite. It doesn't mean like, I can't believe Desiree has that kryptonite. Well, you know what? You could find my kryptonite. I have my buttons as well. So that, oops, let me just. The thing about it is having empathy for each other's kryptonite. I have another chapter, Fact or Fiction, Crankatsuris. And it actually, again, it touches on my attorney experience. And I talk about a trial where you have the opening statement, and normally you talk about what the evidence will show, and I talk about the promises I can make. But one of the things, again, just stepping back, it starts out by saying, like, everybody says you have a right to your own opinion, but they want you to accept their own facts. Well, you accept my facts, you would have my opinion. Therefore, you have no right to your own opinion. In a trial, I always tell a jury, I'm not the finder of fact. You folks are. You're the and so I'm giving you that power. And giving somebody the power to be and having empathy for that. It also talks about the closing argument piece, which is common sense, and having that piece. The other story that I think that's really important in my book, and it's actually important to me, is this chapter, Drive Me Crazy, Crankatsuris. It really, when I had a situation, it's like, wow, I experience this so often, and then it just slowed everything down. So the thing about that chapter is when you have two sentences in your head. The first sentence starts out, it drives me crazy when, and then you can fill in whatever the blank is. And the next sentence is, I cannot understand how. So it's usually somebody else. And that happens a lot. I cannot, it drives me crazy when, and I cannot understand how. And it tells two stories where each person in the story has has that same two sentences in their heads for different reasons, even though the same thing is happening, like in the story, in the different ways to each person. And while I still could get crazy, yeah, it drives me crazy, I don't understand, I stopped myself. I said, yeah, this is something that makes me crazy, but I don't have to act out. Usually when that would happen, that is like a kryptonite to me. It's like, when I cannot understand, and then I get enraged, and I just want to just throw that book at somebody. So that's what it means by slowing it down. And then now, after I wrote that chapter, when that happens, I actually laugh. I bite my tongue a little. Yeah, that does drive me crazy. But I actually could laugh a bit and then say, well, how could I figure this out? This is going to happen. I get driven crazy enough. So, okay, I'll just let it go.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. And slowing down and having a sense of humor. And again, like you're saying, that empathy of seeing the other side of things. I hope that we in the world can do that a little bit more. And by reading your book and your blog and checking you out online, I think that people will be able to do that more and more. One more question, because we're getting close to the end, but I'm curious, what did you discover about yourself as you were writing this book? Did the process of writing it, putting pen to paper, bring out any revelations about you yourself along the way?
Well, it's revelations about like how actually like mistakes like how many times I've been cranky, excuse me, or situations that happened and it didn't turn out all that well. So I could go back in my life and say, well, how would I do it? How could I have done it differently? And then come up with like stories that gives the lesson. So just even like I touched on other things, but one chapter in the book is can of worms Crankatsuris, at which I said I don't understand can of worms. Like why is that so bad? One worm crawls out, you put them back in. And I would say a can of bees. Now, can of bees, that would be pretty bad. You open up a can of bees, they could fly out, they sting you. Now that's really bad. And I say in that chapter, sometimes when you feel really cranky, it does feel like you have like a can of bees in your head, and you do want to open it up and have them all come out and sting you. So I said, well, why not take that can, hold it for a second, maybe rub it, and instead of those bees, it's just worms. And I end the chapter saying, opening up a can of worms, it's not that bad after all, which is, so, if you compare worms to bees, worms are pretty good, so
yeah.
Something to think about.
I agree. Worms beat bees, but we need bees too. So there's a whole thing we could do there about honey.
That's right. Yes, absolutely.
But I love it. I love the way your mind thinks. I love the allegories and the metaphors and the storytelling. I do think that when we put pen to paper and we're telling stories, it is very cathartic. It's a way to discover and unravel the things within ourselves. So congratulations on doing that.
Thank you.
Can you hold up your copy of the book again so that everybody
Sure.
can see that wonderful cover? There it is.
Here's the
And
book,
that-
and this is my other book, but here's this book.
Yep. It's the adult guide to effective crankiness, the Crankosaurus Method. And tell people where they can find it, Stephen. Where can they go?
Well, they could go on Amazon. They could go on any website, book purveying website where books are found. And it'll be Amazon just ships it out to you, but anywhere else where you like to buy your books, you'll be able to find your guide to effective crankiness.
Fantastic. And hit us up with your website one more time so people can find out more about you and follow your blog.
StephenJosephAuthor.com. And that's the fun thing that the book has 41 chapters. There's so much more on the blog. The stories just keep rolling in, and it's just like it's a lot of fun. So if you get a lot of laughs from the book, you go to the blog, the laughs continue, and the education on effective crankiness also continues.
I love it. I love it. Stephen Joseph, thank you so much for being with us here today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
You bet. And thank you, everybody, for joining us here today on the Books That Make You show. And you can find out more about us on our website. That's booksthatmakeyou.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, and of course on YouTube. Please subscribe there so that you're always up to date on the most recent episodes of the show. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The executive producer for Books That Make You is Desiree Duffy. Produced and sound mastered by Phil Giangrande. Engineering by Dave Nabox. Social media and promotion by Bree Sweeter. For more, visit booksthatmakeyou.com.